Man's relationship with music is rooted in nature and goes back over 40,000 years to the time when our cave-dwelling ancestors first began making musical sound. Gradually, man started to create a musical scale by arranging notes into some kind of natural pattern. This man is playing the bamboo flute, a traditional Chinese instrument that has remained unchanged for thousands of years. All the notes he's using are derived from nature. The sound is undoubtedly exquisite, but it's very different from this. Using nature's simplest pattern of notes, it's impossible to create a big orchestral sound like this. So Western musicians have tampered with the natural structure of music to create our own man-made tuning system. For the last 300 years at least, big-name composers have been able to make big-scale music thanks to the Big Bang of equal temperament. The implications of this particular Big Bang affect every single piece of music we listen to. As Western man tried to restructure time through the calendar and the clock, so through equal temperament, we have taken the music that nature gave us and manipulated it artificially. Every note of our musical repertoire is a monstrous compromise. The road from the raw sounds of nature to the artificial smoothness of equal temperament is long and tortuous and stretches right back to ancient Greece, where musicians first became intrigued by the idea of a ladder or scale of notes. And believe it or not, the clever dick who came up with this configuration of notes was a certain Mr. Pythagoras, the same man who brought us the mathematics of triangles. Music was extremely popular in ancient Greece, as it had been in the Egypt of the pharaohs, but as far as we know, its shape and structure was somewhat haphazard. Pythagoras' goal was to give order to the musical free-for-all he heard at every all-night toga party and bacchanalian rave. What Pythagoras discovered was that, rather like the way that architecture relies on perfect proportions to make a pleasing structure, musical notes also worked harmoniously together when they had a simple mathematical relationship. His discovery, according to legend, happened quite by accident. So the story goes, he was walking past a blacksmith's when he heard a harmonious chord of chimes coming from the sound of hammer on anvil. The harmony of the chimes sounded so perfect to Pythagoras that he rushed in to find out more. When he weighed the hammers that were making the sounds, he discovered that they were simple ratios of each other. One was half the size of the first, another was 2/3 the size, and so on. What Pythagoras was actually hearing was a demonstration of natural harmonics. Now, if you take a piece of metal and strike it, it makes a note. It's a simple note, but with many other notes in its overtones, or harmonics, rather in the way that light is made up of a spectrum of different colours. Just because you can't see them with the naked eye doesn't mean to say they're not there. If you listen to the metal bar's note, in the resonance of the sound you might be able to hear various higher versions of the same note. If notes were colours, you could call this note red, and its higher version light red. These higher versions are what we now call octaves, and they're all there contained within the original note, whether you like it or not. That's nature for you. Now, if you take a piece of metal exactly half the size of the original, it will produce as its main note that light red. And if you play the two together, they make a sound almost like one note. An octave, therefore, is a totally natural distance between notes. This is the same sound, only a higher version of that. But if you strike a piece of metal exactly 2/3 the size of the original, you actually create a new note. Call it yellow. And believe it or not, this new note is also contained in the overtones or harmonics of the original. And that's because 2/3 is a naturally harmonious ratio in maths. It was this creation of new notes from the relationship of 2/3 that caught Pythagoras' imagination.
In his time, Pythagoras was as famous for being a mystic as a mathematician. He believed that the universe had its own music, a harmony created by the movement of the planets in relation to each other. The cosmos was to him one vast harmonic ratio made out of lots of smaller ratios which together formed a harmonious musical universe. Just as the sea's tides were affected by the moon's relationship to Earth, so everything on Earth was affected by the movement of the spheres. To Pythagoras, music was the link between man and the cosmos. He even went so far as to claim that he could hear the music of the spheres and used to sing the tunes to his disciples. Since music came, he believed, from the heavens, it would be at its most powerful and mystical when obeying the natural laws of physics. So he set to work creating a scale of notes by dividing metal into simple ratios in what we can only imagine to have been some sort of musical laboratory. Pythagoras' teaching on the natural science of notes had a profound influence on early Western music. If you've ever wondered why we have our particular set of notes to play with, well, they were chosen first by Pythagoras. And he found them by dividing pieces of metal by 2/3. If you carry on dividing by 2/3 again and again, you create an infinite sequence or spiral of notes.
Now, it's quite hard to visualize Pythagoras' endless cycle of notes, so we're going to build a spiral to show how it works, with these colored tiles representing the notes. The first note, red, is easy because that was the note we made from our original metal bar. And that's the foundation or the base of our spiral. By dividing that first piece of metal by 2/3, we were able to create a perfectly tuned new note. Call it yellow. And that goes in a bit higher up.
The pitch of the sound dictates its exact position in the spiral. By dividing yellow by 2/3, we can create a third note, higher still and further round, and so on and so forth into an infinite spiral of new notes.
The mathematical distance between them makes a rather satisfying shape.
With the 12th note in position, you can see from above a pattern emerging with the notes roughly spaced around the circle of the octave.
But when you get to the 13th note, it all goes horribly wrong, which I can show you if I collapse the model. Because the 13th note wants to shove the first note out of the way. This battle to occupy the same space creates a terrible and upsetting dissonance and is the result of something known as the Pythagorean comma. Pythagoras' solution was simple and ruthless, to do away with the notes of 30 and upwards altogether. But the problem of the dreaded comma was even graver than Pythagoras had imagined. It didn't just affect the 13th note, but the distance between every note in the octave. The distance between two notes is determined by tuning. To tune a note is to adjust that distance. For all the notes to work perfectly together, they would need to be tuned so they were exactly equally spaced, like the dials on a clock face. As it was, the comma shifted each note a little off-center, producing a slightly uneven pattern, which got progressively worse with each step of the spiral. To begin with, musicians played extra safe by using only the first 7 notes of the spiral, which, together with the original, made up the basic 8-note scale from which the word octave derives. From the ancient Greeks right through to the Middle